The mountain road wound through valleys so green they looked painted, past meadows where wildflowers nodded in the breeze, toward peaks that touched the clouds. Richard Thornton gripped the steering wheel of his rental car, following GPS directions to a place he hadn't seen in 20 years, his grandfather's house, the old timber cabin nestled in the Austrian Alps, where Richard had spent summers as a child, learning to hike and fish and appreciate silence. His grandfather had died 5 years ago, leaving the property to Richard, but work had consumed him. He'd meant to visit, to decide what to do with it. But there was always another deal to close, another meeting to attend. Now, at 42, Richard was finally here, finally taking a break from the relentless pace of building his investment firm, finally addressing the property he'd been paying taxes on but ignoring. The plan was simple: spend a few days at the cabin, assess its condition, and put it on the market. The proceeds would go to charity. He didn't need the money, and the house just sat there empty, serving no purpose. At least that's what he thought. The cabin came into view as he rounded the final curve, and Richard's breath caught. It looked exactly as he remembered: sturdy timber walls, a steep pitched roof, windows that reflected the mountain peaks, a small barn beside it. His grandfather had built it with his own hands in the 1960s, and it had withstood decades of harsh alpine winters. But as Richard pulled up the long gravel drive, he noticed something odd. Laundry hung on a line stretched between two trees. A small vegetable garden grew along the sunny side of the house. Chickens pecked in a fenced area near the barn. Someone was living here. Richard parked and got out slowly, confused and beginning to feel angry. The property management company he paid was supposed to maintain the empty house. They'd never mentioned squatters. The front door opened, and a woman emerged, a baby in her arms. She froze when she saw him, her face going pale. Behind her, a little girl of maybe 6 peered out, clutching a worn teddy bear. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, with light brown hair pulled back in a simple braid. She wore a faded blue dress that looked homemade, practical, and plain. The baby in her arms couldn't have been more than a few months old, wrapped in a soft blanket. "Who are you?" Richard asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "What are you doing in my house?" The woman's arms tightened around the baby. "Your house? I don't—" "This is the Thornton property, yes, but I was told it was abandoned, that no one had been here in years. It's my house. My grandfather left it to me, and I never gave anyone permission to live here." The woman's face crumpled, and Richard saw tears spring to her eyes. The little girl behind her made a frightened sound and pressed closer to her mother. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, her English accented with German. "I didn't know. I was told. We needed a place, and someone said this house had been empty for years. And I thought—" "You thought you'd just move in? Without asking? Without permission? I tried to find out who owned it. I went to the village, to the town office, but they said the owner was in America and hadn't been back in decades. I left my information. I said I would pay rent when I could. We needed somewhere to live." Richard took a breath, trying to calm down. "Start from the beginning. Who are you?" "My name is Anna Weber. This is my daughter Emma. And my son Jacob." She indicated the little girl and the baby. "We've been living here for 4 months. I know I should have tried harder to find you, but we were desperate, and I thought maybe—" She trailed off, clearly fighting tears. "Where's your husband?" Richard asked. "He died 9 months ago. Climbing accident. He was a mountain guide. We had nothing, no savings. His life insurance was minimal. I couldn't afford rent in the village, and I had nowhere else to go. Someone mentioned this house, and I'm so sorry. We'll leave immediately." She turned back toward the house, and Richard saw her shoulders shaking. The little girl, Emma, started crying quietly. Richard stood there, briefcase in hand, tailored suit suddenly feeling absurd in this mountain setting. He'd come here to assess property value. He hadn't expected to find a widow with 2 young children living in desperate circumstances. "Wait," he heard himself say. Anna turned back, hope and fear warring in her expression. "It's late," Richard said, glancing at the sun already sinking toward the peaks. "And I need to understand the situation better. Can we talk, please?" Anna nodded hesitantly. "Would you like to come inside?" "It's your house, of course." I've been taking care of it. I promise I haven't damaged anything." Richard followed her into the cabin, and the smell of home hit him immediately. Wood smoke and baking bread and something. Herbal, the same scents he remembered from childhood visits. The interior was exactly as he remembered. Stone fireplace, timber beams, simple furniture his grandfather had made. But it was also different. Cleaner somehow. More lived in. There were wildflowers in a vase on the table, curtains on the windows that he didn't remember, a child's drawings pinned to the wall. The house felt warm, inhabited, loved. Anna settled the baby in a wooden cradle. Richard remembered his grandfather making decades ago and guided Emma to a chair. The little girl watched Richard with wide, frightened eyes. "Would you like coffee?" Anna asked. "Or tea? I can make something to eat if you're hungry. Just water, please." Anna filled a glass from the tap, the same hand pump his grandfather had installed, and set it in front of him. Then she sat across the table, her hands clasped tightly. "Tell me your story," Richard said. From the beginning. And Anna did. She'd grown up in the village below. Had married her childhood sweetheart Thomas at 20. He'd been a mountain guide, taking tourists up the peaks, teaching climbing and safety. They'd lived modestly but happily in a rented apartment. Had Emma were trying for another child. Then 9 months ago, Thomas had been leading a group up the Waldspitze. An unexpected storm had blown in. He'd gotten his clients to safety but had fallen during the descent. By the time rescue teams reached him, he was gone. Anna had been 6 months pregnant with Jakob. "The insurance paid for the funeral," Anna said, her voice steady but her eyes distant. "And there was a small payout. But it wasn't enough to live on, not long term. The apartment we rented was too expensive without Thomas's income. I tried to find work, but who wants to hire a pregnant widow with a young child? And after Jakob was born." She gestured helplessly. "So you came here." I remembered hearing about this house as a child. The old Thornton place, abandoned for years. I came to look at it, thinking maybe I could just stay for a little while, until I figured out what to do. But it was in such good condition, structurally sound, and it was empty. So I moved in and I told myself I'd find the owner. I'd make it right. But then Jakob was born and I was just trying to survive day to day. "What have you been living on? How do you eat?" Anna gestured toward the window where her small garden grew. "I grow what I can. The chickens give eggs. There are berry bushes in the woods and I know which mushrooms are safe. I've been making preserves and selling them in the village. Mrs. Hoffman at the market lets me leave jars there. It's not much, but it's something." Richard thought about his penthouse apartment in New York, his expensive suits, his investment portfolio. And here was this woman making jam to survive, raising 2 children alone, living without electricity in a cabin in the mountains. "The property management company I pay," Richard said. "They were supposed to be checking on this place. They never mentioned you." Anna looked down. "I hid when anyone came. I was afraid they'd make us leave. There's a spot in the loft where we'd go, and they never checked thoroughly enough to find us. How long were you planning to live here like this?" "I don't know. I was trying to save enough money to rent a small place in the village. But it's so expensive and I'm barely earning anything. I thought maybe another year, maybe 2, until Emma was old enough for school, and I could find more regular work." She looked up at him, her expression desperate. "I know I was wrong to be here without permission, but my children needed a roof over their heads and I didn't know what else to do." Jakob began to fuss in his cradle, and Anna stood to pick him up, rocking him gently. Richard watched her. This young mother who'd lost everything and was surviving on determination and ingenuity. "I'll leave tomorrow," Anna said quietly. "I'll take the children and we'll go. I have a little money saved. Maybe Mrs. Hoffman will let us stay above her shop for a few days while I figure something out." "Where will you go after that?" "I don't know, but that's not your problem. This is your house and I had no right to be here. I'm sorry for the intrusion." Richard stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains he'd loved as a child. He thought about his grandfather, who'd built this house with his own hands, who'd believed in helping people, who'd taught Richard that wealth meant nothing if you couldn't use it to make the world a little better. "What if you stayed?" he heard himself say. Anna went very still. "What?" "What if you stayed here? You and your children, properly, legally, not hiding." "I don't understand." Richard turned to face her. This house has been sitting empty for 5 years. Before that, it sat empty whenever my grandfather wasn't using it, which was most of the time after he got older. It's a good house, a strong house, and it deserves to be lived in by people who need it. I can't pay you rent. Not much, anyway. Maybe someday, but right now, I don't want rent. I want... Richard paused, figuring it out as he spoke. I want this house to serve a purpose, to help someone, and you clearly need help. Why would you do that? You don't know me. No, but I know what my grandfather would want. He built this house to be a home, not an investment property, and you've been taking care of it, maintaining it, treating it with respect. That means something. Anna was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I don't deserve this. I broke into your property, lived here illegally. You were desperate and trying to protect your children. I understand that. You can't just give us a house. I'm not giving it to you. I'm letting you live here for now while you get back on your feet. We can formalize it with a lease, make it legal. You can pay a nominal rent, say €1 a year, to make it official. And when you're ready, when you've saved enough to move on, you can go. But you don't have to leave until you're ready. Emma, who'd been quiet throughout this exchange, suddenly ran to Richard and hugged his legs. Thank you, she said in German. Thank you for not making us leave. Richard felt something crack in his chest. He knelt down to Emma's level. You're welcome. And I'm sorry I scared you earlier. Emma nodded seriously, then went back to her mother. Anna was shaking her head in disbelief. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll stay and let me help you. But why? Really, why? This makes no sense. Richard thought about his life in New York. The endless work. The accumulation of wealth he didn't need. The relationships that never quite worked out because he was always too busy. The gnawing sense that despite all his success, something was missing. Because I can, he said simply. Because it costs me nothing to let you stay here, but it means everything to you and your children. And because maybe, just maybe, this is what I'm supposed to do with this place. Anna looked around the cabin, at the home she'd created in these simple rooms. Then she looked at her children, Emma playing quietly with her teddy bear, Jakob sleeping in her arms. Yes, she whispered. Yes, thank you. We'll stay. Richard left the next morning. But he came back a month later with a lawyer and proper paperwork. Anna signed a lease for €1 per year. Richard also arranged for some improvements. A small solar panel system for electricity, a phone line, a better water heater. He set up a fund to cover property taxes and basic maintenance. I don't need all this, Anna protested. Maybe not, but it makes life easier. Let me do this. Over the following months, Richard found himself returning to the mountain house more frequently. He'd tell himself it was to check on the property, but really it was to see Anna and the children, to sit at the simple table and eat bread Anna had baked, to watch Emma play in the meadow, to hold baby Jakob and feel the weight of tiny trust. He started teaching Emma English, bringing her books and games. He helped Anna expand her preserves business, connecting her with specialty food stores in Innsbruck and Vienna. He even tried his hand at fixing the barn roof, though he was terrible at it, and Anna ended up showing him how. You're a millionaire, she laughed, watching him struggle with hammer and nails. Surely you can hire someone to do this? Where's the fun in that? The village below started to talk, of course. The rich American and the widow. But Richard didn't care, and Anna learned not to. They mean well, Mrs. Hoffman told Anna at the market. They're just surprised to see someone help without wanting something in return. He doesn't want anything, Anna said firmly. But Mrs. Hoffman just smiled. Doesn't he? It was Emma who said it first, 8 months after that initial meeting. Richard had come to visit, bringing Emma a book she'd been wanting. She hugged him and said, I wish you could stay forever. I wish you were my papa. Anna had hushed her quickly, embarrassed. Emma, you can't say things like that. But Richard had just looked at this little girl who'd lost her father, and at the woman who was working so hard to give her children a good life, and at the baby who was starting to smile and laugh, and he realized something that should have been obvious months ago. He was falling in love, with all of them, with this life that was so different from his own, with the simplicity and authenticity of these mountains, this house, this family. That evening after Emma was in bed and Jakob was sleeping, Richard and Anna sat by the fireplace. The autumn air was crisp and the fire crackled warmly. Anna, Richard began. "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her expression gentle in the firelight. "I think I know what you're going to say." "You do? You're going to say you want to sell the house after all. That this arrangement isn't working. And I understand, really I do. We've been grateful for every day we've had here." "No, that's not what I was going to say at all." Anna stopped. "Oh, I was going to say that I think I'm in love with you. And with your children. And with this life. And I'd like to know if there's any possibility that you might feel the same way." Anna stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. You what?" "I know it's complicated. I know you love Thomas, and I'm not trying to replace him. I know I live in New York and you live here. I know we're from different worlds. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about helping a stranger, and became about wanting to be part of your life, your family." Anna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I did love Thomas. I'll always love him. He was my first love, Emma's father, but he's gone and I've had to learn to live without him. And in that living, I've discovered that hearts are bigger than we think, that there's room for more than one love in a lifetime. So you're saying..." "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you too, with your kindness, your generosity, the way you are with Emma, the way you've helped us without asking for anything in return. But Richard, I can't leave this place. My whole life is here in these mountains, and you have a life in New York. What if I didn't? What if I restructured my business so I could work remotely, spend most of my time here? What if instead of visiting I stayed? You'd give up your life in America for us?" "I'd trade my life in America for a life with you. There's a difference." Anna reached for his hand, her fingers slipping between his. "It won't be easy. We're so different." "The best things never are." They sat like that for a while, holding hands by the fire, letting the future settle around them like snow on the mountain peaks. Richard did restructure his business. He brought in a managing partner to handle day-to-day operations in New York and set up a home office in the barn he'd fixed. He flew back to the States once a month for essential meetings but spent the rest of his time in the mountains. He and Anna married the following spring, in the village church with half the town watching. Emma was their flower girl, carrying wildflowers from the meadow. Jakob, now a toddler, was passed between family members during the ceremony. "Do you think Thomas would approve?" Richard asked Anna the night before the wedding. "I think he would be grateful that someone is taking care of his children. That someone loves me. That we're not alone. You were never alone. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm strong because I had to be. But it's nice not to have to be quite so strong anymore." They had more children, a daughter they named Maria, then a son they named Peter. The house that had once sat empty was suddenly full of life and noise and laughter. Richard expanded it, adding rooms carefully so as not to disturb the original structure his grandfather had built. Emma grew up bilingual, attending school in the village but spending summers helping at her mother's now thriving preserves company. Jakob became fascinated with mountains like his biological father had been, and Richard made sure he learned to climb safely. Maria and Peter grew up knowing they had a brother and sister who'd come before, who'd survived loss and come out stronger. 10 years after Richard had first driven up that mountain road, he stood in the same spot looking at the same house. But everything was different now. The garden was larger, the barn had been converted into Anna's workshop. Solar panels gleamed on the roof. Children's laughter echoed from the meadow. Anna came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "About how I almost sold this place. About how close I came to missing all of this. But you didn't. Only because you were desperate enough to break in and stubborn enough to stay." Anna laughed. "Are you saying I'm stubborn?" "Incredibly. It's one of your best qualities." Emma called from the house. She was 18 now, home from her first year of university. "Dad, Jakob's trying to convince Mom to let him solo climb the Wildspitze." Richard groaned.